Unintended damage is when something goes wrong. Either a fin breaks on a weapon and the weapon goes off course, and everything we drop is a mechanical device. And as like as we would that these things be perfect, they are in fact not. Mechanical devices that we employ fail. And so we will have some degree of that. We will also have some degree of intelligence failure. We don't have perfect information. The Alfredos bunker example or the Chinese embassy are examples of perhaps of intelligence failure. But it is what happens when something goes wrong. And it's really important to understand these two distinctions. And it's important because we can do a great deal to plan for and mitigate collateral damage. We can do a great deal to mitigate the potential for unintended damage, but there is very little we can do to plan for or substantially eliminate unintended damage, because it is by definition something went wrong. And so when we understand that difference, when you see something that might occur on a battle space, it's important to understand that that doesn't necessarily mean we're throwing the cart out with the bathwater, or baby out with the bathwater. We still went through a methodical process. But when it comes to pass that we are forced to, or we engage in military operations, both of these types of damage will take place. Slide, please. Let me talk a little bit about how we do this. Everything, first of all, there's not a target that we would strike that is not specifically struck to achieve a desired effect. And so we look at that target and we say, what do we want to do to that target? I want to neutralize, or I want to destroy this bunker. And then I examine what munitions I might use to destroy that bunker. Ideally, if you could turn the lights off and make everybody go to sleep, that would be really nice. Unfortunately, some of our capabilities are not quite that advanced, and in many cases we have to resort to physical destruction. Slide, please. When we do that, we do an analysis not only of the target, the size and capabilities of the munition designed to create the right effect, but we also do an analysis of the surrounding area to understand what the use of that munition on that target might do to structures outside the facility, or to create either civilian casualties or collateral damage. Slide, please. If, however, in the course of dropping that bomb, a laser-guided bomb, for example, a fin breaks off the laser-guided bomb and the thing goes spiraling 3,000 feet away from the target, there was really no practical way for me to plan for that. That is not collateral damage. That is unintended damage. And if there are civilians killed, they are unintended civilian casualties. I don't mean to kind of draw a fine legal line between the two, but it's important to understand that as we plan these things, there are a great deal of things we can do to mitigate collateral damage, and in fact the potential to mitigate some unintended damage. But these things are mechanical devices, and some will fail. And so the fact that if somebody has a hope that we're going to go into a conflict and nothing is going to happen in terms of collateral damage, unintended damage, or civilian casualties, I think you should absolve yourself of that hope, because that probably is not a realistic expectation.
Bug splat only for kinetic weapons?
I think we like to use the term fast CD, but we do have an improved capability. It is designed principally for kinetic weapons. That is true.
But does it have other abilities to protect the effects of non-kinetic weapons?
I don't know the answer.
Or is that a different algorithm?
I don't know the answer to that, quite frankly.
Explain what that is, please.
We have developed planning tools that are at our air operations centers to enable us to more effectively project the potential explosion of an armor or structure. An example, when we were doing operations in Afghanistan, I think that we all need to hire the Afghan workers to build our walls, because we would blow a house up inside a wall, and it seemed like that wall protected all the structures around it. But the reality is when we drew our circle to examine potential collateral damage, we didn't take into consideration that there was another building there, or there was a wall, or that I was hitting one side of the building, and the size of and the direction of the explosion that takes place on the ground is in fact not a circle. It's more like a butterfly effect. And so by using that tool, you can better understand the environment and the immediate neighborhood of where you're dropping that munition. And then you can do an examination of various things that might include changing the size of the weapon, changing when the weapon fuses to perhaps fuse the weapon underground to mitigate that explosion even more, or even changing the direction of your attack axis. Because if you attack from one way, you might completely mitigate all effects if things work properly, but if you attack from another, there might be no way. So it is one of a series of planning tools that we have incorporated into our air operations centers and out on the carriers as well, to examine different alternatives on to better employ the right weapon and the right target in the right way. Slide, please. As I mentioned before, I think this issue of effects-based operation and collateral damage are fairly closely tied together, because the best way to mitigate collateral damage is only strike the stuff that you need to strike to, or affect the stuff that you need to affect. Nevertheless, as we go through, in the simplistic sense, in the macro world, there, from a targeteer, Air Force targeteer viewpoint, there are probably 50,000 targets in Iraq, maybe even more. But that's only a target in a development effort. In other words, as we examine a country, and we know Iraq pretty well, we look at every bridge, every power station, every military infrastructure, every air defense site, and we catalog and develop a requirement of what that potential target might look like and what I might have to do to neutralize that target. Nevertheless, what happens is we go through that planning process of defining clearly established political objectives, military objectives, determining the desired effects I want to create, and then examine the target sets that I need to attack. I come up out of that 50,000 with some list of targets that I need to examine. Every one of those targets is examined for collateral damage. We first look to ensure that the target is directly tied to an objective. We then ensure that we know enough about the target so that we can create the desired effect. You don't always know enough about the target, but to the degree that we can, we will try to understand what we need to do to that target to affect it. We choose the right weapon to create the desired effect. We then do a clear examination not only of the collateral damage potential, but also of law of armed conflict potential. And those types of issues, the legal implications of striking that target. And then we do everything we can do in the planning factor in adjusting the weaponeering and providing the tasking to air crews to enable us to most effectively achieve the desired effect with the minimum damage and minimum potential collateral damage for civilian casualties. Yes?
You talked earlier about you would not bomb a target where there is unacceptable civilian casualties. What is that threshold? What is acceptable civilian casualties?
If it were that easy, and I could tell you that answer, I'd probably be a general. But the reality is that these are very, very tough decisions that the senior leadership, military leadership has to make. There is no magic number that says 5 is acceptable, 6 is not. There is no magic way to determine when I do something, whether the potential of civilian casualties is 5 or 10 or 20. We do have some ballpark assessments based on the population of an area, of who might be living in that area, whether it's a residential or commercial area, and the time of day you might strike that. But there is simply no way that I can say there's an easy answer. But in each case where the potential for civilian casualty exists, for potential for collateral damage, those targets are all reviewed by the senior commanders.
Let's take the example you're talking about, a Baghdad neighborhood. I mean, and you have a population estimate for a particular area. Do you say, does the planner say, okay, acceptable is X% of the population in that area?
I think it's really important to understand that in most instances, I won't say the majority, but a large percentage of instances, most of the targets that we are striking actually have very low potential for collateral damage because they're military targets that are generally military installations of that sort. Nevertheless, there are going to be targets in which a closer evaluation needs to be made and some sort of determination by the commanders in the field of what is an acceptable number or what we anticipate an acceptable range might be. And there's no one answer. Each target, you look at what for example, if you had a nuclear or a biological weapon sitting on top of a Scud missile that was surrounded by civilians, and that thing had the potential to go off and hit Kuwait or Israel, then I would probably be willing to accept a greater degree of civilian casualties because of the consequences of not acting on that target. If, on the other hand, it was a Scud missile without a warhead parked in a barn, then I probably wouldn't be willing to take as much risk to go after that target. But in each instance, the commanders will look at what the specific effects are, what they intend to achieve, and whether or not that desired effect and military worth is worth that trade-off in terms of potential civilian casualties.